Yo, 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 what's going on? It's another edition of the BeU podcast. It's your boy Ashley coming back at you on the mic. Remember, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere podcasts are streaming. Also, check me out on YouTube at the BeU podcast. Also, if you have any questions, concerns, or anything that you want to talk to me about, hey, get at me in the Gmail as well, too. BU.2.2D, letter D, fullest, at gmail.com. Um, yeah, man, got a special one today. I have the pleasure of having recording artist Substantial come on the BU podcast for me. How you doing today, brother?
Peace. I'm good, brother. How about yourself?
Man, I'm doing really well. I'm very happy to have you on and excited to speak with you today. And I'm sure some of the individuals that are listening should probably be some listeners of your music, or if they aren't, they probably will be after this podcast. So I'm appreciative to have you on. Also happy to also aid you with your art and things in some type of way on my platform. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, same here, man. So, of course, I think a lot of people want to know, and first, as far also myself, how did you come across the name Substantial? Also, how did you decide, say, hey, I'm going to get into music, I'm going to rap, I'm going to produce, and I'm going to do all these
Hmm.
other things? And
Yeah.
I, I think that with, within our community and just people individual in the arts, that's kind of a hard thing to kind of say, okay, I'm going to do, because it's not the thing like the parents really don't want to see, and they
Hmm.
fear you're going to struggle and things of that nature. So how how did you come about making that decision?
Yeah. To answer the first part of the question, the name Substantial wasn't something I came up with. It was actually given to me. I had a different stage name at the time, and
Right.
um, and basically one of the homies, my man Beef, we all used to call him Beef when we were in college, and he basically put on a showcase at the school that had a lot of notable other artists on it. Talib Kweli was on the bill, Black Thought was on the bill, and he booked me as the opener. And unfortunately, I was double booked. I had a gig that was out of town in Virginia that I
Yeah.
had to do. And basically, I went to let him know, and he gave me the flyer. Like, oh man, I already got your name on the flyer. And then I looked, and I didn't even see my name because I had a different name at the time. But I saw Substantial, and he was like, "Nah, that's you." And I was like, what are you talking about?" And he basically was just told me straight up, like, "Yo, your rap name's trash, fam." Like that right there, though, it describes your music, what type of person you are. All it encompasses all of those different things when you think of the definition of the word. And the best part of it, it got your real name right in the middle, Stan. I was like, "Yo, it's kind of dope." I was like, "That's kind of dope." I got sunned and I got hooked up all at the same time. It was crazy. So yeah, man, I took it on as an AKA for a while, and it got to the point nobody called me by my old rap name. Everybody called me Substantial. So I stuck with it. You know what I mean? Yeah, man, it was just crazy how that came to be. But before all of that, before I got that name, because I was living in Brooklyn at the time, where I was going to college.
Yeah.
But before that, as far as how my mom responded and my family, man, I would say my family was and still is about as supportive as you would expect
That's beautiful.
anyone to be when they decide to go into a profession that they know little about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's the important thing. I think most people hate on like being a rapper as a profession or being a visual artist or anything like that that isn't commonplace, right? Like even if they
Yeah.
do see it a lot, if they don't actually um, know or interact, because people always say be a doctor or a lawyer, and then one could argue, well, how many doctors or lawyers do people actually know? Actually, all of us go to doctors, right? And depending on what your problems have been in terms of legal situations, you know what I'm saying? You might have had to interact with a lawyer or had a family member who has. So it's actually very commonplace, even though a lot of people aren't doctors and lawyers, right? On average, like per capita, right? And
Yeah.
so I would say that like you know even if you know a bunch of people that rap, you don't necessarily know a bunch of successful rappers. and there's a difference. You
That's
see what I'm
very true.
saying?
Hmm.
But yeah, man, I think my mom and them, they kind of thought it was a phase. And truth to the matter is, my mom didn't even think I was gonna get into art school. You know what I mean? So
Mm,
rap was, something. She was like, let's see you do this other thing first. And basically, as quick as I got to New York, within 2 years of me being in New York, I was in
yeah,
talks with Def Jam Records. Even before I got to New York, I was in talks with people that I met from Columbia, Mercury Records, like a bunch of different majors and some larger indies, like all of that long before I even met
yeah,
Nujabes. And so it was something that, it didn't seem like a pipe dream because, I was, as quick as I decided I was going to become a rapper. When I made my first demo, I was in talks with a major label within the same year. So, you know,
yeah.
yeah, so so yeah, man, I mean, as soon as things start popping, go and start heading overseas, start popping up in magazines and stuff, mom's was all in. You know what I'm saying? Had a magazine up in the car. That's my baby.
Yeah,
So
that's my
yeah,
man.
right. You know.
That's beautiful, man. And it's good. Like I said, it's good to also have you on as well too, because like I said, people, probably a lot of individuals that listen to music or listen to, I believe the genre is called Japanese jazz, which is the genre that Nujabes is in, and other some of these kind of hip hop fusion jazz artists, producers that are here. Um, that you, like you said, you were on the move for way before Nujabes,
Mhm.
which is dope to hear. Um, Also, so from here, like I said, you just dropped Animal Arithmetic, which is a very interesting album. I thought it was super dope. Um, I kind of like to know where the inspiration of that came from and kind of what's next, for you. Who you looking to work with? What are you looking to do? I kind of
Sure.
realized, listening through your discography, it kind of seems like you're kind of, which I have to believe, it kind of seems like a lot of rap artists do. You're going on to more of the production side now, because I
Hmm.
started to hear less of your voice in your
Hmm.
more recent works. So I'm kind of curious to where you're going next.
Sure, sure. So with the album Animal Arithmetic Volume 1, that came out back in February. Basically, the inspiration behind that, shout out to the homie Katie Fox. It's a collaboration with her. She's an
Yeah.
illustrator
Okay.
from out of Queens, New York, who stepped to me maybe 2014, 2015 with the idea that she had for a manga that she had written and was illustrating and developing. And she let me know that, at some point in time, she wanted to have me produce a soundtrack for it. Most people just know me as a vocalist, know that I rap, but I've been making beats since I was 15 years old. I just really hadn't really put them out there because I've always been connected to a lot of different producers, whether it was Nujabes or whether it was,
Mm,
No from Cunning Linguist, my man Tone Deaf,
mm,
Odyssey, and Marcus D, of course, and so many other notable producers. Like people are so used to seeing me and who I've collaborated with that that I guess after a while it's like I never had a shortage of beats. So like so I never necessarily needed to really push mine out there like that. And I was still really I changed like the different hardware I was using and different software. Like it kept changing so much that I just hadn't found anything that I was really fully comfortable with, like I was the original hardware I was using. So anyway, um, you know, when she asked me to do the soundtrack for it, because I've been doing more and more production over the last few years, and my music started to pick up in terms of my numbers and the type of numbers that I'm doing now versus what
yeah.
I was doing prior to releasing my first instrumental project. Like my streaming numbers are much higher. So I started to realize it was like, hey man, like seems like people don't mind the production too much. So I've been producing for other people, just building my reputation as a producer because the goal is to ultimately be able to self-produce my next album, which I'm currently working on now, and it's almost done, and it's completely produced by me. And so yeah, so So I pitched that to her as well. I was like, look, I'm down to do it, but I think, because of the production I've been doing, I would like to take a stab at producing the entire album as opposed to just finding another producer and rapping all of their beats. And then the other
Hmm.
concern nowadays too is that I do know some producers whose stuff is sample free or they sample stuff that is clear, but a good majority of the producers nowadays don't necessarily clear their samples. And so, and as my numbers have increased over the years, so does the attention. And with her IP, I don't know, none of us know for sure like how big this manga is going to become. And then if it turns into an anime, like we don't know like how big this will become. And so I told her, I was like, yo, we don't want to put constraints on how far we can take this, because the moment everything pops off and this music we want to use, now we got to rush to try to clear every sample that we didn't clear. So I was like, just let me take the reins and do it, and then we won't have to worry about that, because the stuff that I do is I use royalty-free samples if I sample at all, and I have a lot of live instrumentalists that I collaborate with. So yeah, man. So that was the approach to working on that particular record, and yeah, it's not so much that I'm trying to rap less. It's more of a thing that I'm diversified, right? Like in terms of like my revenue stream, my income, and all of that. I make a
Yeah.
lot more money producing for myself and producing for other people than I do rapping.
Yeah.
And
Cut on those
I mean, I
costs.
right, and it's like, and I make good money rapping as well. But the reality of it is, a lot of people want to work with me, but not everybody want to pay me what I'm
Mm,
worth. And I think that some people, they have a very limited like view in terms of what my career actually is, because 9 times out of 10 they only
mm,
know me through like one or two artists that I've worked with, either
mm,
Nujabes or somebody
mm,
else who brought them to me. And so they don't
mm,
realize that, like, fam, I've worked with major brands like Bentley Motors, Amazon, Ford, you know what I mean? Like, they don't realize that I've done music for like 10, 12 video games at this point, and all of this other stuff. So if someone's trying to hit you up and they're lowballing you or trying to get you to do a collab for the love, and I'm like, hey man, like, I take care of two beautiful little girls, and me, take care of me and my wife doing this. So like, I got to be mindful of my time and where my energy is invested, especially when you're working on your own albums too, because it's a lot of
mhm.
time invested, and there's no upfront money when I'm working on my own stuff. So I might be working on a project for 2 years, a couple months, and that's
Yeah.
no money while that's being developed, right? But money is going out
Exactly.
to pay the people who want to be a part of it, if they need that up front as opposed to after. So yeah, so I got to be, you know, the older you get, hopefully the wiser you get, and I'm just trying to make small business moves, man, and making sure that I'm setting my family up for a good future, whether I'm a part of that future or not. You know what I mean?
Mm, mm. That's well said, man. Me and my homeboy that just sometimes comes in and hosts, we had a cast about like just basically, stepping into countries. It was based around countries or just zones where you're appreciated the most, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, yeah, you got a person that knows who you are and what you worth and what you've done. They're gonna
Hmm.
pay for that.
Right.
And they should. If they have it, if they're not coming to the table because they broke.
Hmm.
So it's like, look,
Right.
man, like you said, this is what I've done. Here's my resume. It's some
Hmm.
pretty, high end stuff on my resume.
Hmm.
Hey, you got to pay me.
Right.
And
Right.
and I think a lot of people need to understand that, like, that are in these type of industries and things like that, and especially in our culture, like we always want to take the low ground, right? Take the best.
Hmm.
Oh well, maybe if I do it now, later on they'll pay me.
Hmm.
Now they ain't already paid you, and like, oh, well, we don't want to work with you no more.
Right.
Now you missed out, you know, on the money that you shouldn't gotten because you assumed and you thought that later on down the line, like, oh, okay, yeah, they'll up me later on, yeah, after they hear my work, even though they've already heard it because they're at the table with you, you
Right.
know. So yeah, brother, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
you you doing it right. You know what I'm saying? And you've been doing it right for as long as you've been doing it because you're successful at it. Um,
Appreciate it, man.
so yeah, man, that's super dope, man. And yeah, like I said, I noticed that you have done a lot with a lot of now the video game stuff. I was looking at your bio on your website. I didn't know what video games you were in, but I think I want to kind of um talk about the manga and with the Japan and Nujabes stuff because it's all similar.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
since we are still talking about albums, um I, on my train rides, about train, you've been to Japan and stuff like that. On my train rides and
Mm-hmm.
stuff, I was running through some of your the discography of yours, and two albums kind of really stood out to me. But first, as far as your albums are concerned, this is actually a question that from Instagram that Muscle was here. A guy
Mm-hmm.
named Muscle was here at Instagram. Thanks for the shout out to you, man. Thanks for the question. He's just kind of curious about what is your when you go into albums when you're writing songs. What is your writing process like?
Sure. Yeah. So it depends on what the project is, right? Like if it's an album, a lot of times before I write a single song for the album, I decide what the theme of the album is going to be. And then usually I spend a ridiculous amount of time trying to figure out what the production is going to be for the record, trying to build the soundscape
Mm,
before I write anything. And even if I do write some things, it's before I've developed those key points. Um, it's
mm,
usually like a couple lines. Like if I'm just kind of vibing or I'm walking down the street and a line comes to me, like I'll have a Google Doc where it's like it's just lines that I could potentially use for whatever my next thing is. Because sometimes just a bar or two will come to me and I'll just write it down,
right.
or document it in some way, shape, or form. And
Yeah.
then, but usually once I have the beat, before I really dive into what the lyrics is, like I said, I figure out what the theme of the song is going to be, and then I spend a lot of time scatting to the music, like just like figuring out what flows that I like over the beat, but then also figuring out what tones sound good, like whether I'm gonna be use a more aggressive tone and delivery, or if it's going to be more melodic. I spend a lot of time
Yeah.
thinking about all of those things before I write a single word most times. Um, and then
Yeah.
sometimes I use a strategy where I'll basically record myself scatting, and then like if I really like what I developed, like in terms of the flow and the
Yeah.
tone, like I'll sometimes loop sections of it and just kind of keep running that back until I turn all of the nonsense down. I'll take all of that stuff and let it keep playing over and over again until I'm able to turn all of that into words that matches the amount of syllables, the tone, all of
Yeah.
that. Now that's
Wow.
not always my process, but that's definitely something I keep in the tool bag, right?
Mm,
Um, yeah, man. So it's just a lot of playing around and stuff, depending on what the subject matter is. Like if it's a topic that is maybe something I haven't rapped about before. If it's
right.
deeply personal, I just kind of spend some
Yeah.
time like really meditating on the subject matter, kind of making some notes to myself. If it's something that's dealing with more worldly issues, whether it's like social issues, things of that nature, then
Yeah.
a lot of times I might do some reading. Just like I'll read a few articles, maybe a book that I know about that is related to that thing. Just kind of
Yeah.
doing some research and getting, because I know what my perspective on that particular thing is, but I'm interested to hear others' perspectives too. Because my perspective, even though that may be how I feel, that doesn't necessarily make it right. So
Yeah. Exactly.
yeah, so I'll do my research and for certain subjects and really try to challenge myself. Maybe watch a documentary, whatever. You know what I mean? Just to take in additional information, just to give me more to pull from when I write.
That's awesome. That's all. And I'm glad you brought those things up because with my journey into stepping into being, excuse me, into being a creator with this podcast, I realized and like I said, it really opened my eyes to artists such as yourself and or even just regular, just who just focus on podcasters. amount of time you have to put into, first of all, which you think people, a lot of people think is easy, is like promoting.
Right.
I can't even. You think it's easy because you're on your phone all the time, right?
Right.
I can't even, you know, promote my pod as frequently as I want to.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't have a rhythm down or like a system to, and I'm still learning a system to
Mm-hmm.
like get it out, get it out, get it out, get it out, get it out,
Right.
get it out, right? So people can see it and say, "Oh, okay, it's the BU podcast. I'm gonna check
Mm-hmm.
that out." It's been, this guy's been, putting it out there, putting it out there. But I don't have that system yet, and just
Right.
researching and reading up, and just like even preparing to speak with you, kind of finding the time to just look through your website, go back through your music, like I of course I know who you are, but
Mm-hmm.
to be quite honest, not until like up to this interview with you, I didn't really deeply research you, but I
Mm-hmm.
knew I'm like, substantial, this dude is dope, like his music is dope, I love listening to it. But since I'm gonna speak with him, like
Mm-hmm.
I need to do a little bit more, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to ask you some questions that are specific to you, and just like you stated, well, you said you want to know the other person's opinion. You want to make sure you're well versed on what it is going to be talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So I that has opened my eyes and given me a lot of respect to the cats that are successful, such as yourself and any other highly successful known. Like you
Mm-hmm.
said, there's a lot of cats that ain't known, known artists
Mm-hmm.
out there in the world. Um, the two of your albums. The first one, I want to know, you got to kind of get the inspiration. The past is always present in the future, and I was I was on the train really trying to wrap my brain like what exactly does he mean? Like, okay, in the past, you know, becomes the present, but then you say like the present is always in the future. So I was still
Mm-hmm.
trying to, feel like, now where you getting at with that?
Mm-hmm.
And one track that I had on repeat on the Spotify, man, is Black of All Trades, man.
Mm.
That song is
Appreciate it.
beautiful. That song is dope.
Thank you,
Um,
man.
and when like I said before, I looked on your website and just look at, like, okay, I get where you got it from, because you are doing a lot more than just the music. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But can you just kind of talk about that album, the name, and
Sure.
you know, and maybe touch on Black of All Trades, because that song, hey, everybody out there, get on Spotify, listen to Black of All Trades, because that song is cold.
I
Um,
appreciate it.
yeah,
Thank you.
no problem, man. Can you kind of talk about that?
Sure, sure. Yeah, man. So the album "The Past is Always Present in the Future." Um, I remember coming up with the title for that record. I was on my way to New York with my wife, and yeah, like I was thinking about what the themes of the new record would be, and how I wanted it to deal a lot with legacy, right? What type of legacy
Mm,
you leave behind, and it started and it clicked. It was like the past is always present in the future. And when I said that out loud to my wife, she was like, "Oh my God!" I'm like, "Right?" you know. It is one of those things like, man, you start wrecking your brain. Like, did I really just come up with that? Is this not a quote that someone else said? Like, really questioning yourself. Because sometimes when you come up with something that's too good, you start being like, man, that had to come from somewhere. Like, I
somewhere
couldn't,
else.
you start having that, start doubting yourself. But yo, like, yeah, that was all me. And basically, what it means, it's one of those things as you grow older, a lot of times, especially in hip hop, and it happens in all popular music, but I can only speak to hip hop in terms of that. That's the area I work in the most, right?
Yeah.
And the older you become, you start to be viewed as irrelevant, and
Mm,
the whole thing with this album, the point that I was just like, man, like all of these things from my past, fam, they're here right now. So this question of relevance, the question of relevance is irrelevant, right? And it's because
mm,
none of us are truly original, right? We're
mm,
literally we're a compound of all of these different things that existed before us, right? From the
exactly.
elements that exist in stars, to like ideas that were taught to you from a very young age, the like your parents feeding different ideas into you.
Mm,
All of these things come from something else. And those
mm,
ideas, God knows how old they are. And even when you come up with something new, you're using a language that someone else came up with hundreds or thousands of years ago. And
mm.
like, and how you phrase it, how you structure it is based on systems and things. Like, we're literally we're walking time capsules, all of us. You know. Hold on one
Yeah.
second.
Yeah, take your time, no problem, sir.
Sorry.
No, no, you good,
Yeah.
man.
Did you? I don't know if you could hear that, but like, so, out of nowhere, music just started playing in my AirPods, so kind of caught me off guard.
No
That's why I
worries.
paused a
No,
little
no
bit.
worries.
But yeah,
No
I was
worries.
like, so like, is that Lil Wayne? Like, what is happening right now? It was super random. So anyway, but yeah, so that's what that title deals with, right? Like, the past is always present in the future, like,
Beautiful.
just that whole concept. So anyway, when working on the album and talking about legacy, part of my legacy is the fact that I do what I can to make sure I am not remembered as this, or not seen as this one-dimensional artist, right? Like, I'm
Boom.
not a one-trick pony. I'm
Mm.
not just a rapper, right? Like, you know, and this is like, and I don't be trying to flex and brag a little bit, but sometimes you just got to say stuff so people know, because they love
Got
to
to.
talk to you. Like, there's people who love to talk to me like, oh, the only reason why anybody care what you've done because you worked with Nujabes, right? And I'm like, all right, consider why Nujabes called me, because I didn't call him, fam. Like, he called me. So consider what it is that I was doing that was so great that man made this man make a long distance call at a time where it was way more expensive to do that, right? To reach out to this dude who was a quote unquote nobody, right? So,
That's
because
real.
that literally at that time, I was in talks with Def Jam Records at the exact same time that Nujabes was reaching out to me. So, like, all of these all of these different things, but at the same time of doing that, I'm literally attending Pratt Institute for graphic design, and Pratt is like a top 10 art and design school in the world. And
Yep,
so
saw that
I'm
on your
doing
bio.
that.
Hmm.
Right. So I'm doing that, making music. I'm freelancing, doing graphic design and stuff like that. And that was
Word.
back then. Nowadays, I'm running my own business, a consulting service that I run with my wife. We're doing
Beautiful.
different types of events and stuff to support creatives and better inform creatives and create opportunities. But the point is, all of my heroes, or most of my heroes, they were multi-dimensional. They practiced multiple disciplines. You know what I mean? Somebody like a Gordon Parks, he was an amazing photographer, right? But then he
Right.
was also a journalist, and then he
Yeah.
was also a composer, wrote symphonies.
Boom.
He
Boom.
scored and directed his own film, which was based on his best-selling book. And then he wrote multiple books. Like, this dude, this whole idea that you can, if you're a jack of all trades, you're a master of none, is nonsense. Because when we look at the Harlem Renaissance and other, like, just other movements of artists, a lot of them were multi disciplinary, practice multiple disciplinaries, right? Like, multiple disciplines. Pardon me. So like, they were multi hyphenates before that was a term, right? And
Yeah.
so that's what I pride myself on being, and that's what that song is about. Just the idea of me really embracing the fact that I'm a multi hyphenate, and I don't have to be great at one thing. I can be great at multiple things. You know.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And you definitely, touch on that through the whole song. You know, um, and
Right.
just being a black man and a black man in general, and how we should
Right.
move. You know,
Right.
that's one of my now on my Spotify list for the morning. One of my get me up, get going, get motivated. Let's go. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
You know
And
what's
the stuff you
funny?
saying. Yeah.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but I just
No,
wanted
go
to
for it.
add, um, like, when, the reason why it's black of all trades, right? Like, I remember doing a panel. and there was a young artist there who was basically saying like, "Yo, I don't want to be known as a black artist. I just want to be accepted as an artist." And and I felt what she was saying, and I was like, "Yo, I absolutely understand and acknowledge what you're saying." And I too sometimes feel like that. But the truth of the matter is, I'm a black man in the United States, and that literally that's the lens that I see the world through. That informs my daily decisions. That informs the art I make, both music and visual
Yeah.
art. There's no getting
Yeah.
away from that, right? At
No.
least for me.
Mm, mm.
And I think sometimes that, there may be some people in my audience who maybe question that sometimes for me or whatever, because I'm not necessarily, not every one of my songs is about like revolution, being revolutionary per se. Um, but it's absolutely like, it informs every decision I make, like in my day to day, whether I'm aware of it or not. Like it's always present. Like I have
Yeah.
no, it's not like I'm trying to tap into something, fam. I'm just out here existing. You know what I'm saying?
That's
So
it.
I can't pretend, but I'm not gonna pretend like, it doesn't inform my decisions. Like I
Yeah,
think
no
as
doubt.
a black man as well,
Mm,
because how we navigate certain spaces and when we move through the world, we're sometimes made hypersensitive in terms of how people see and view us and how we move, because we
yeah.
know that when we make people nervous, it might
Mm,
result in us being in prison or killed. So
mm,
like, and
mm,
that's not
mm,
everywhere I go, but I'm
mm.
so used to understanding that dynamic and and I've been in enough of those situations where that the trauma from those situations, it doesn't just go away. It's like it's
No.
unresolved trauma. So,
Yeah,
like the reality of it is, it informs a lot of what I do, whether I want it to or not. So I just fully
absolutely.
embrace it as a part of who I am.
That's right. I embrace it as well too, man. Yeah,
Hmm.
and I know heading on back to United States and even here in Japan,
Hmm.
a lot of people don't think, and even some Japanese will say like, "Oh, we don't know what racism is because we're all Japanese," and I'm like, okay, like you may not completely understand the construct because you are homogenous, but at the same time, you're subconsciously doing it.
Right.
You know, you're
And
sep-
they
you
understand what prejudice is. You know what
Yeah, they
prejudice is.
understand prejudice. They do
Right.
that. They know, they definitely
Yeah.
understand that.
Right.
Um,
Right.
you separate. Yeah, we're all foreigners,
Mhm.
but you separate us. You do. I see it. I see it
Mhm.
all the time. I've been here for 10 years. I know it's okay.
Mhm.
Like, and you don't have to, glaze over it for me. Like, I'm from
Mhm.
America. I'm black and from America. So the you doing is easy. Like, you ain't even like sweeping it under the rug too well. Like, I know what you're doing.
Right. Right.
how, how much you want to convey to me? Like, oh, no, 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 so they like, no, no, it's that, and it's okay. So let me just kind of
Mhm.
inform you if you're ignorant to it. What it is that you are doing,
Right.
and why it's not okay. You know what I mean? Um,
Mhm.
yeah. So, and the other album that kind of stuck out to me was because it's unique in itself. Because I you know, with black artists that I listen to, rap, whatever it so may be, I've never seen anything like this. Was the soundtrack for Fatherhood. I've never
Yeah.
seen. I mean, I can't even think of many songs where, and they're probably out there. Don't get me wrong.
Mhm.
Uh, a lot that focus on that now
Mhm.
because of the theater of the United States recently. Of course, a lot of artists have been jumping on the mic with the radical um resistance, type of songs and things like this. But this one,
Mhm.
man, I was like, oh, this really stood out, you know. And I say you got it inspiration from a book,
Mhm.
but what made you say like, oh man, I'm about to fully lock in and just drop an album just straight up on Black Fatherhood, you know?
Mhm.
Uh, what set you down, say, okay, I'm about to do this.
Right. Yeah. So the book that is based on is a children's book that I actually wrote. That was based on a song that I wrote.
Oh,
Yeah. So the song I wrote is called "In My Daughter's Eyes," and so there's two versions of the song. The first version is on "The past is always present in the future," And then shortly after, a fan gave me an idea when my wife and I announced that we were having our second kid, and it was another little girl. They were like, "Yo, you should do part two to In My Daughter's Eyes." But then they were like, "Yo, just move the apostrophe though," and I was like, "Hey, that's kind of dope." And so yeah, so I wrote that song, and one day while we were listening to the mix of the song, my wife and I were in the car on our way to pick up my oldest daughter, and my wife gave me the idea. She was like, this could be a book. And I looked at her sideways, trying to figure out what she was thinking, and she referenced I think Celia Marley. I think I'm saying her name right. One of Bob Marley's daughters. She turns his songs into books, and she was like, "Yo, we could do something
Right.
like that." And I think this song would be perfect for it since you rap about like both our kids. We could do that absolutely. And so so we started playing around with the idea, started refining the lyrics to make it work as a children's story. Hired an illustrator, and then we self-published the book ourselves and put it out there. But then I thought it was like, I became a father back in 2008, and since then, like I've written a lot of songs about fatherhood. So I was like, what if I took all of these different songs that I've written about fatherhood and then put them on one album, right? Like, but then write some
Yeah.
newer songs that kind of, you know, really capture this current moment that I'm in, and then work that out, and I pitched that idea to my partner slash wife. She dug it, and so we just start playing around with the whole idea of the soundtrack for fatherhood, and yeah, man, the reception has been dope, man. Like, just really,
That's good.
it's been really, really dope to see people connecting with it. It's been dope to see how people connected with the children's book as well too, because that was something I hadn't done before. But it's dope to
Beautiful.
be able to say I'm an author now, right? And so now we're playing around with the idea of a follow-up book to that. We also have another book that we're brainstorming on now and developing for Black of all trades, believe it or not. So yeah, man, just really because I've been an educator for over 20 years as well. So just
Yeah.
really, like, even though I don't work with the little kids anymore, this is still a way that I can, through writing these children books, I can still reach those young people while, like, I'm still teaching middle school and high school kids, and then higher kids who are doing higher education as well. So I teach like music business courses through two different programs right now. But yeah, man, the children's books are just a good way to still pass lessons to the real young ones who I used to work with.
Very cool, substantial, man. Yeah, and like I said, yeah, everybody definitely, if you're a black father, give that album a listen on Spotify, the soundtrack for fatherhood.
Appreciate it.
Um, very, very, very cool album, man. Definitely gave me a little bit more inspiration and focus and foresight, on how to focus on my son, and be a good black father for my son, especially having him being multiracial as well too. But
Mm.
I think as we, as black men, as we always say, you black, but
Right.
he does, he does, understand, he will understand that. Of course, he's Japanese and he's also African American at the same time. But
Right.
it is definitely a dope album. I'll check that out.
Appreciate it.
So now Japan,
Hmm.
Japan, man. Um, it, first of all, just brothers finding Japan and getting into Japan and things of that nature is always a interest of mine because when I was at my university and I studied abroad, I studied abroad in 2007 in Tokyo, and I was the only black dude on my study abroad class.
Right.
I think in my university, the university I studied abroad at, I don't recall seeing anybody look like me too much.
Hmm.
So speaking of us about Japan is always something very interesting to me. And I've also noticed that hey, you're a manga head, anime head. You've also alluded to video games and things of that nature.
Hmm.
But before I get into Nujabes, I'm really sure, but prior to that, you were into Japan. So
Yeah,
like what brought you to Japan? Like how did you
sure.
get into Japan?
Yeah, I first learned about Japan, I think it was like second grade. That was when they were teaching us how to write like some of the characters in one of my classes in elementary school.
Oh,
And and actually, no, I'm lying. I think it was actually before that. I had a classmate, wasn't like maybe like I can't remember if it was kindergarten or first grade, but I had a classmate um, who like initially I just knew he was Asian, right? But I didn't necessarily know where he was from. You don't find a lot of Japanese people in the region of the United States where I live. But this one particular
yeah,
kid he was Japanese. Most of the kids that I would come across in our area were
yeah,
either Chinese or Korean. But this one kid was Japanese, and so he would come. He would share his lunches with
right,
me. I would share different things with him, and we were cool briefly for that one year we were in class together. So I learned a little bit more more about his food than anything else, right? But just like the cultural differences through him first and foremost. That was my first experience with someone who was Japanese. But then second grade, we
yeah,
started learning more about Japan in class and stuff like that. And so then fast forward,
yeah,
it was when was the first time I watched anime and knew I was watching anime. Because a lot of times we see anime, but we don't know that it's anime. But the first time someone broke
yeah.
down to me that, yo, you're watching anime, was in high school. It was, I think our teacher was out, so we had a sub, and the sub was like, "Oh, y'all can watch something on the TV." So they rolled a little cart with the TV in it, the old school joint with the VCR,
Yep,
you
I
know, the
remember them.
TV bolted down on the cart. And yo, the homie just happened to have VHS cassettes with anime in his bag, like he was just ready. You know what I'm saying? Stay ready, you don't have to get ready. And he happened to whip out, I think it was a Fatal Fury movie, one of the Fatal Fury movies. It was, I
Ah,
forget what the
I've seen one of
character
those
was.
joints.
Yeah, but I know it was a scene where they go to shoot this guy who's like the main villain, and Money catches the bullet with his two fingers, looks at it, and then throws it into the head of the dude who shot at him.
Yeah,
I look at my boy because I have never seen anything animated. One, look this good, and two, be that violent. So I immediately roll up to dude who put it in. I'm like, what is this? Where can I find more of it, son? What is happening right now? And I'm looking at the sub because the sub is not watching, right? Like the sub is sitting on the other side of the TV, so she has no idea what we're looking at. Um, yeah,
yeah.
man, but instantly it grabbed me, right? And so my man put me on, told me what we was watching, started telling me about anime. Back then people were still calling it Japanime, right? So to
Mm,
let you know
mm,
how
mm,
long
mm, mm,
ago it
mm.
was. Um,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
so yeah, man, he just put me on, let me hold copies of certain things, then eventually gave me a copy of the Street Fighter joint with no subtitles, just straight up in Japanese. Then and he hooked me up with Ninja Scroll. Ninja Scroll was like, oh my god, this
Oh,
is
and this was
crazy, man.
dope.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
of course
Yeah.
Akira and Fist of the North Star, man. I just did the deep dive, fam.
Oh,
Just everything I could get my hands on. And so obviously I was more into the action stuff early on. Um,
of course.
yeah, like I like some of the comedy stuff is cool. Like probably the stuff I watch nowadays. What's it? Way of the House Husband. That's my joint. That's probably the only
Yeah, that
comedy
was
that I
funny.
actually love, right? Cause I can relate to that whole domesticated thing. So I'm home chefing it up these days. You know what I'm saying? Chilling. So yeah, so that's my show, man. I love that joint. But man, but yeah, so that was probably those things were my introduction first and foremost to Japan, and then eventually when I got to Brooklyn, when I was going to school at Pratt in Brooklyn, I met my
Yeah.
man Tomo, and my man Tomo was from Japan, but he was a hip hop head and he rapped, and he would tell us sometimes like who his brother was. Like, yeah, my brother is like like a pop star, son. He's like a world famous rapper, or like famous in Japan. It was his brother Zebra, and so I didn't know what that meant until I got to Japan and eventually saw who Zebra was, and people were like, "Oh, nah, this dude is like, you know what I mean, legendary." So yeah, man. So I was friends with uh, Tomo, who was Zebra's brother, and he's the one who introduced me to Nujabes because we would hang out
Mhm.
sometimes in Brooklyn. I recorded. When we went to a studio together in Manhattan and recorded some stuff. Shout out to my folks, 24 Hour MC and Essential Entertainment, all of them good folks. My man John, Chufu, and all of them. Phil Real. But yeah, man, we would come through there. We recorded some stuff, and there was a mixtape I hopped on from my man DJ Biscuit, who now go by Bisco Smith,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah, like we recorded that stuff, and that was what he ended up taking home with him to Japan after we exchanged numbers. That ultimately he shared with
Ah.
Nujabes while he was working at Nujabes' record store, Guinness Records, and that was basically how the connect was made. You know what I mean? Because Nujabes was like, "Yo, you know," he asked him straight up. He's like, "You know any dope rappers, any really good rappers in New York?" And New York is New York, fam. Like there's no shortage of rappers to choose
No
from in New York.
shortage. None.
And
Yeah.
my man, of all the people he could have mentioned, he was like, "Yo, you need to check out my man Substantial." And um, and so he let him hear this mixtape that I was on, the one I mentioned before, and he loved what he heard. So then he had my man give him my number, and he just cold called me. Like I had no idea he was calling. And keep in mind too, because I think a lot of times, I don't downplay like the significance of Nujabes coming into my life. I don't downplay it, but I also remind people because they talk about how quote unquote lucky I am, right? And I gotta remind them, I'm like, yo, this is before Samurai Champ Blue, fam. This is before
Yeah, this is for
Smith
example.
had like, yeah. So this is the like he wasn't this like this. He wasn't what people see him as today. So when he called me, it's like not like the name rang any bells. Like his company wasn't really known like that outside of Japan. So and keep in mind, fam, I'm talking to major labels. I'm already doing, I'm getting paid gigs. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not what I am now, but I'm
But you
no
were good.
slouch either, right? Like I'm no
Yeah,
slouch, and I'm
you were good when New Job Base came into the picture. Like you were
right,
good.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when he reached out, you're always hesitant, man, because it's like I've been at that point in time, I had been at it in terms of like making demos, talking to major labels, doing gigs, winning competitions, winning MC battles.
Mm,
Like, fam, I was
mm,
because this is '99 when he reached out, so my demo was recorded. So I've been at it for like a good 5 years straight,
mm,
and not just doing it in Maryland, like doing it in Maryland, DC, some in VA, but then now in New York, getting respected by legendary rappers in Brooklyn and different places.
mm.
So 5 years of just hustling. So I don't impress easy, right? Like so when he's saying certain things, I almost hung up on him because I thought somebody was playing games. So it's like I
Yeah.
heard his accent, and because he didn't mention my man Tomo, that was the one of the last things he mentioned. He was just like saying a whole lot about who he was and who his label was, and it wasn't ringing any bells. And I'm just like, yo, I feel like this is a practical joke. I'm about to hang up the phone, and then he mentioned my man Tomo, and I was like, oh, okay, should have started there. Let's start there. Um, but yeah, once he mentioned my man Tomo and stuff, then I put on, I started actually really, really listening to what was being said. And he basically was like, yo, if you could send me more of your stuff, if I like what I hear, I'd like to offer you a deal, and I'll fly you to Japan so we could record an album together, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, and that's what happened. You know what I mean?
That's dope. That's dope. And then y'all on a plane and go to Japan. Um, how how was it working with Nujabes? I mean, me being in Japan for 10 years, me speaking the language fluently and living among them for so long, um, I'm I think I could say I'm very kind of versed and understanding of like Japanese culture, and
Mm-hmm.
especially when dealing with females and males and how working with males can be Japanese males. Um, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of having this idea that New Job Base probably moved a little bit differently, or how was it you adjusting? 'Cause I have a feeling it was still some cultural things like in the studio. You was
Yeah.
kind of like, huh? Like maybe.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for
So,
sure. Like,
um,
yeah, I would say, Yeah, it was challenging to say the least, man. Like that's
Mm,
the quickest
mm,
answer to that is it was very challenging. Partly
mm.
because as a rapper, it's hard enough getting to the point, getting comfortable enough with yourself that you can accept feedback from other people, right? But a lot of times when you're getting feedback from somebody who does what you do, right? Now, working with him was a bit different because he wasn't necessarily a rapper. Well, not even necessarily, he wasn't a rapper, he was a producer. And I worked with
Period.
plenty of people who were just producers, but it was weird sometimes because like Japanese culture is very much like you have to be conscious of sometimes what you're saying, what you're doing physically, try not to offend certain people who are viewed a certain way. All of these little things, and those things exist in many other cultures too, but just Japanese culture is very strict with certain things.
Mm, mm,
And
mm.
so, but I'm very much a dude who calls out hypocrisy too. So I push buttons and I piss a lot of people off with that
Off.
because
Yeah.
yeah. So like you know because he technically was older than me, right? And like and all those things. So
Right.
it's like it's the whole big brother thing, and it's just like I think he was very much accustomed to working with certain people where it's like, yo, this is what I'm saying, this is what we're doing. And so at one point in time, I had said midway through the process of working on the album, I was like, listen, I don't mind feedback to a certain extent, but I got to make sure I'm putting my authentic voice out there, right? Because these songs are written about personal things in my life in some at some points. So how I deliver it like is directly related to what the message of the song is. So you can't come up to me and say, "Hey, I want you to do it like you did on this song." And then I got to stop and explain to you. I'm like, "Well, listen, because I know there's the language barrier because English is his second language. So he might be missing certain nuances, right? So
Yeah.
I would have to stop and explain. And I'm talking about, man, we be in the middle of recording and then stop for like 2 hours, fam. Like an hour,
Yeah.
2 hours to have these very like heavy
I
conversations.
already know. Yep. Yep.
And that for some people, I think people are like, oh man, you're so lucky. That's cool. I'm like, fam, that is mentally
No, it's tiring.
exhausting
Exhausting.
because yeah, because this isn't the first song we recorded today, fam. This is the third. And now I'm doing a song about a friend of mine who was killed, and you're telling me I should do my delivery the same as a song where I'm talking about like it's
No.
like battle rap. It's punchline stuff. Like I'm being funny and witty. And because of him, he's just thinking that tone works best on this beat because he's not focused
Yes.
on the subject matter, right? And I'm
Yes.
trying to tell him no because there's somebody who actually understands clearly what I'm talking about, and I
Yeah.
will sound crazy rapping like that, talking about like my man died. You know what I mean? Using certain
Yeah.
inflections in my
Yeah.
voice. That's because how we say a thing is just as important as what's being said. And
Yeah.
that's true in Jap and that's true in all language, not just English. But
It is.
but sometimes people who don't understand all the nuances in certain languages, even if they speak it a little bit, they might miss
Yeah.
that. That's why we
Yeah.
sound crazy saying certain things in Japanese the first time we speak Japanese. Like the Japanese people look
Yes.
at like, that's not how you say that, fam. You know what I'm saying? That
Yeah,
ain't
they're
it.
real quick. Yeah, yeah. If
Yeah.
you notice, they're real quick on it too.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah, yeah.
they,
Like, because that was something we ran into, right? Like, where because I was so engulfed in the culture,
yeah.
I wanted to put little things about Japan in my songs.
Of
And
course.
he was shutting it all down. Like if I said something like a Japanese word, he was like, "Nah, you can't do that." And I'm like, "Fam, I've been going to nightclubs for the last month, watching Japanese rappers get on stage and butcher the English language.
This motherfucker, do you speak it?
Fam, I can't say one word. Like, what are we doing? You know what I'm saying? Like the hypocrisy, fam. And so, yeah, man, it was just but I was respectful of that. But I also let him know, like one of the biggest fallouts we had was, where like it was before because a lot of people caught on to Jun after the fact. They caught on the Nujabes after the fact. So when I first started working with him, he hadn't started branching out yet to do stuff that sounded more like soulful house music,
Right.
or stuff that was like a little bit like R&B or real jazz heavy. He didn't have
Right.
a lot of that in his repertoire yet. So for the most
Yeah.
part, the stuff he was doing was like, it was like boom bap influencing like a lot of like jazz samples and things like that. So it was stuff that had
Mm.
already been done, right? It wasn't. He hadn't done the groundbreaking stuff yet, and that
Mm.
was one of the conversations we had because he was just talking to me about what it is he was going for aesthetically and blah blah blah, and and he was talking to me like I didn't understand what he was going for. And I just was like, fam, no, I get it. I was like, but that ain't my issue. My issue is you're talking like you created something and you haven't created anything. You're participating in something that is already like foundation for that has already been laid and you're carrying that torch, right? Now, I was like, now when you start doing some other things with it, things that we haven't seen done before, then I can understand your point. But it ain't there yet. Now, for context, and I know it's probably some people who gonna watch this and be in their feelings, but I always gotta remind folks, fam. I'm like, I knew him, you didn't. So I'm just telling you the truth, and you can talk to everybody who knows him and has had these conversations in different ways. And the people who knew him know how it was sometimes talking to him, and sometimes we all like all of us when we finally got together after he passed, because most of us didn't meet until after Jen passed. We all would
Mm.
talk about like how we'd all bump heads, right? Like with him and the similarities and certain things. And so again, um, we just had this because he was really offended by what I was saying, and I was like, I'm not questioning your talent. What I'm just trying to
Mm.
tell you is like to be mindful of the fact that we got to be mindful of talking like we created something that already exists. You know what I mean? Or like because a lot of what he was doing, you could hear his influences. There's beats. If you listen to my first album, there are beats on my first album that you can hear like Premier influence, right? And you can
Mm.
hear like other like maybe Pete Rock influence on another track, or you could hear his influences. And then in his
Mm.
later stuff, there's like maybe one or two tracks on the album where it starts to sound like what you hear on his solo stuff. But for the most part, he wasn't
Yeah.
there yet, and he spent a lot of
Yeah.
time like learning from other people, the Fat Johns of the world, and Funky
Yeah.
DL, and all like building with these
Yes.
brothers, and to develop his style further. And of course, when he met Uyama Hiroto, adding the live instrumentation to what he was doing. And of course, him picking up the flute later after realizing that Fat John played the flute. Like all those things played a huge part in him developing his sound further down the line that started to go in that direction that people know him for now. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
but yeah, man. So it was challenging, man. And I'm pretty. He called me out on stuff. I call him out on stuff. But that's what a good relationship's supposed to be. You're supposed to be able to
Yes.
talk honest. You're gonna have fun.
Yes.
You're gonna eat good.
Yes.
You're gonna party sometimes, and then you're gonna have
Yeah.
arguments. And yeah, we experienced all of those, all of those things. You know what I mean?
Man, that's beautiful to hear that firsthand. And I'm so glad you brought up some awesome points, which I've talked about on my podcast before.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope y'all are listening. He substantially hit on a lot of things that I have dealt with and just what it is dealing with the Japanese culture. The one big thing I like that you hit him on was even though he's like this big producer in Japan, bruh, this been here.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
you did not create this. You took this and you're attempting to make it into something that is yours. And they
Right.
have a very, 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 very big problem with that.
Yeah.
I had a
I mean,
whole I I hold on, let me
go ahead.
I had
No,
a
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
whole no, I because this is funny. I had a whole Japanese dude. He's an older dude, not no child. He's about my age at the time. I was working for this Japanese construction company that I might talk about this another. I kind of got tricked into working into like doing hard labor and stuff like that. But it was one of the most interesting experiences of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And he asked me, no, he thought that McDonald's, the American restaurant that started in the 1900s in America, was a Japanese thing.
Mm-hmm.
I said no.
Mm-hmm.
That came from America to Japan. That's
Right.
an American thing. And now
Right.
it's in Japan, and now you guys are adding your twist on it for your market.
Right.
That's what it is. So
Right.
I'm so happy you brought those things up. That just the guys on the stage butchering English, but you jump into the studio, you want to add some flavor for the culture, for
Mm-hmm.
their culture. Yeah, dame, dame. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so,
They
so,
shut
so no
shut
yo
it
ni tenía
down.
una idea. So, mm,
Yeah, they would shut it down, fam. Yeah, and that
so,
and that for me was definitely one of the most awkward conversations, one of the first awkward conversations we had. And it was like, I'm just trying to, and I just said to him, I was like, look, I ain't got no problem. I don't have to say it. I'm just trying
yeah,
to understand why y'all think it's okay to do, like, why y'all think it's okay to mimic us, but somehow it's disrespectful if I do that on my track. And it's like, especially when I'm telling you my intention is not to be disrespectful, and I got
yeah,
you here with me to
yeah.
coach me to make sure I'm using it in proper context and all of that. You know what I mean? And yeah, man, it was a really interesting thing, and so I just kind of left it alone. I think years ago, I eventually did something on a track where I was just being funny, you know, where else, I don't know if I can curse on here, so I ain't gonna say what I said, but yeah,
No,
it
you can
was
curse, man. This is the
oh,
BU
okay,
podcast, man. You can curse, bro. No problem.
yeah, and I basically was like Ebonics plus Japanese is Ebonese, and so it was like, and I basically say something. I was like, so the greeting is it's like mushy mushy motherfuckers. This is basically how we start this song, just being funny because the song's called Tokyo Twilight. And it was just like,
Yeah,
yo, that's something that I mean, of course, like to this day, if anybody knows that album in particular, that song, they come up quoting that shit to me. But like, I mean, man, that was probably 10 years, maybe, yeah, like 10 years after I made that album and had that conversation with Jim before I was like, yeah, I think I'm gonna just do it. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, but like, it's a lot of stuff that is definitely very interesting. And I try to be as respectful as
absolutely.
possible, just because that's the
Yeah.
type of person I am. And
Mm,
so like and even where I'm at now, I mean, I appreciate it, and I try not to borrow as much, even if there's
mm,
context for it in something I'm doing,
mm,
simply because all of us are a little guilty at appropriating something, right? Like
mm,
there are just different instances where sometimes people try to call something appropriation where it's not appropriation. It's like, fam, you're in a place where your culture's been stripped from you. So you're doing these things simply because that is what you were taught is the norm in the region you live in. You know what I mean? So that's different. That's not appropriation. So, but like I remember for my album Sacrifice, where I did the cover that had Sepulchre being performed on the cover, and like probably if I was to go back and do that cover again, the likelihood that I'd have that on my cover is slim to none. But like,
yeah.
but I think it's also important to know that like when I've educated myself and realized these things and try not to fetishize people's cultures, it's important that
Yeah.
they extend
Yeah.
that same type of respect and and listen a bit better when people are trying to explain to you what it is that you're doing that is potentially
Exactly.
problematic. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm glad, before we go ahead and I ask these last two closing questions and things like that, I'm glad that you said that. And also glad if you hear like you were saying this to like well, for Japan, in
Mm-hmm.
his realm, in his on his base, telling him this
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Right.
And among Japanese don't do that because, like you said, it's the whole senpai kohai like type of
Yeah.
structure. So they would never have that conversation with Nujabes. So
Right.
in turn, you doing that probably, which I'm sure it did,
Mm-hmm.
help propel his career,
Mm.
help propel his music
Yeah.
in,
It's
into
funny.
something else.
Yeah, and it's funny. I try not to be out here like, yeah, son, that was me. You know what I'm saying? But like, but I definitely recognize the importance of certain conversations, and it's really one of those things. Like, it's not a documented conversation. It's just, while my memory's still good, I know what the conversation was, and then I know
Yeah, you know
what
what it was.
and I know when he first played, like when he started doing his solo albums, and he was playing it for me. And I remember hitting him back, and I was like, "Yeah, bro," like hitting him up, like when I heard his take on "Ordinary Joe," which was a remake of an old song. And I remember telling him, I was like, "Bro, like I tear it up, like for real, like this is beautiful." You know what I mean? But I was like, "Yo, this is it. Like this is you're doing something." And even then, you can hear the influences from other things, but he managed to kind of he made his own. He was cooking gumbo, man. He made his own thing. He mixed in a whole lot of things and found something that was unique to him. But I think the same thing that made me a better rapper is the same thing that makes other people better musicians, and that's sometimes tough conversations, tough working circumstances that just push you further. You know what I mean? To help you
Yeah,
develop a bit better. You know what I mean?
dope, man. Thanks for giving us that insight on the Nujabes and you're working with them. And I think that's very cool to hear that, and the very like how you guys work together. And hey, like you said, a lot of people think like, no, he ain't go against Nujabes. I'm like, no, like
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's what you got to do to make good stuff to make and to get some type of understanding and things of that nature. And more people need to be like that with the Japanese because when you do, they will tend to turn the other cheek at some point, but it just take a little time. But if you really lay something on them, like okay, it can change something with my trajectory, like money,
Mm-hmm.
clout, whatever it so may be, then they like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay. And like you said, they may not even like make a notion that, oh yeah, Ashley helped me with this. Oh yeah. So when I said down how this conversation was substantial, like this is how this kind of came about. And like, you
Mm-hmm.
know what? I was like, whatever, like that's cool. Like you said, I was already excelling, yeah, and I'm gonna keep doing that, regardless,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But that's very dope, man. Like I'm very cool to hear that because, like I said, you know, I found you through Champloo, through New Base, and then when I got into your solo stuff, um, like I said, it's awesome to be talking to you about those things, here on this platform that I created. And the last two things, and you could hit them, briefly as quick as you can. I know it's getting late over there in PG County. Um, the closing. This actually, I didn't get the Instagram name on this individual, but I think this was a good question. The first one is that who do you admire?
Mm-hmm.
And last of all, which I really want you to leave something with the people is, as an educator, as an artist, as a graphic designer, as all that. Um, what do you have to say to people just to motivate individuals just to be you, man, just to be yourself? And like I said, the BeU podcast, that's where I got the inspiration for that, being in Japan, because a lot when people before I felt like, in my opinion, a lot of foreigners come over here and just even in the society in general, there's no type of BU, like no go out there and be you, you know.
Right.
So just those two questions, man, and
Sure.
then we'll go ahead and close it up.
Yeah. People I admire, man. I deeply admire my big sister. Shout out to my big sister Lisa. Um,
Mm,
because man, I admire anybody who like has really lived through some things that literally crush and defeat most people, and they come
yeah,
back stronger. And my big sister, man, my big sister had her first child when she was pregnant at 15, had her when she was 16, and
yeah,
then ended up dropping out of high school. Later went back, got her
wow,
GED. Um,
beautiful,
she had another kid. My other niece, shout out to Brandy, my first niece of her two daughters, and then my second niece Nathalie. Unfortunately, she lost her due to injuries she received in a car accident. Again,
Man,
something that
condolences. Wow.
yeah, man, I
Okay.
appreciate it. But like those circumstances cripple most people.
Yeah.
Um, she continued working, continued to develop herself. She later decided she was going to go to college. She went and got an associate degree first, and then eventually got a bachelor's
Yeah.
degree. And then she recently, at like she's over 50 now, she recently went and got her master's degree. So this is a woman who dropped out of high school not too long after having her first daughter when she was still in high school, and
Mm.
now holds a master's degree. Right, like she used to look at me and be like so proud, still does, you know what I mean, and finds a lot of inspiration because I was the first of my siblings to go to college and all of that. And but later, and then even with the traveling thing, right? Like what made
Yeah.
her inspire her to go to China and all of the places that she's been in the world was seeing me go to Japan. Like she's used to say, she's like, I didn't just admire you, I was jealous. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're my little brother. I'm supposed to be doing all this stuff first. And so, but like it motivated her to do a lot of dope things. And so, man, I deeply admire like anybody who realizes that it's not too late to grow, that
Boom.
like that just because they call you a grown up doesn't mean you're done growing, right? Like,
Never.
so so shout out to all the lifetime learners. Definitely, if I had to only pick one person who I deeply admire and who I admire more than anybody, it's my big sister.
Beautiful,
um
man.
yeah, man. So for everybody, in terms of advice on how to be you, a great way of, I mean, there's a couple things I would say. Like, you know, it's hard to be you when you feel like you still haven't found your voice, right? So,
Mm.
um, the first step is really kind of knowing what's truly you. How much in your day do you do actually because that's what you want to do versus you
Mm.
want to please someone else, right?
Mm.
And
Mm.
a lot of
Mm.
us are trying to please other people. We're trying to keep the
Yep.
peace a lot of times. We avoid having tough conversations because we're thinking of other people's feelings. Meanwhile, mentally we're suffering. So
Mm.
so I think the first step for most people is trying to really find your voice. And then I encourage people to travel, right? Like, and I don't mean just go somewhere to live, because when you go somewhere to live, you ultimately are going to you're going to acclimate like to your surroundings, right? Like you're going to
Yeah.
adapt to the environment you're
Yeah.
in. But
Yes.
visiting's different because when you're visiting and people know you're visiting, they give you the pass, right? There's things they
Yeah.
would typically not let slide in their day to day, but they understand that you're a tourist, you're coming through, you're learning, right?
Yeah.
And you didn't know that that wasn't the thing to do, and they'll give
Yeah.
you a chance. So I
Hmm.
encourage people to not, and I know it's not always safe to travel by yourself, but if you can find somewhere safe to travel, a few places, and go by yourself, because I find that
Yes.
when I've traveled by myself, it's I'm not always worried about like well, I want to do a thing, but these four other people I'm with or these three other people I'm with, they're not going
Yeah.
to want to do it,
Exactly.
or I mention it, they don't want to. I can explore. I can kind of try new things without being judged. I can, what I mean? Like I find that because when I tour, I don't always tour with a ton of people, right? Most of the time, even when I am touring with other people, we're all flying from other places, right? I'm from PG, but I actually live in Northern Virginia now, right? And so a lot of times when I'm touring with Marcus D lives in Tokyo. So,
Yeah.
we're touring Europe for a month. He's flying in from Narita, you know what I mean? And I'm flying in from Dulles or you know what I mean, or somewhere else.
Hmm.
And we're
Yeah.
meeting up in a foreign country. So I get in a good 10, 12 hours sometimes just being by myself and experience certain
Yeah.
things. And even when we get to the country, sometimes we don't meet up immediately. I'm
Yeah.
moving through that country by myself. And I just find
Yeah.
that it's helped me find my voice over the years and sometimes say things in situations where it ain't always what people want to hear, but it is my truth, right? And there's a lot that I introduce to people that a lot of times they ain't feeling. And then all of a sudden, 5, 10 years later, it becomes the thing that everybody does. And now all of a sudden, I don't do it enough, right? So it's helped me get comfortable with who I am and allowed me to kind of just
Yes,
not care so much when about people's judgment and things like that.
definitely.
So yeah, man. So find your voice, you know, walk in your truth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And before I close it, yeah, that's a good point. It me living in Japan and visiting some other countries like Korea, Singapore, Philippines, and things. It's just like yeah, the whole judgment, the whole you know, just caring what people think. I mean, it's good to hear what the people think. Don't get me wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but just like I'm much more conscious of who I am and what I need and what I
Yeah.
don't need. Let me say it like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes I talk to my friends and tell them like, yeah, I don't want no debt because I don't need this. I don't need that.
Mm-hmm.
And you can kind of hear like the I don't know. I guess you kind of concerned and just kind of like what's going on. You know what I mean? Like why does
Right.
he need that? Like you know
Right. Right.
you know what I mean? Like I just don't.
Right.
And I think a lot of that comes from being in Japan and just seeing other things, meeting other people, and experiencing so much. uh, You know, I'd rather spend my money on something else.
Yeah.
Put it towards my son, put it towards the future, something like that. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I don't need that.
Yeah. And a lot of times people project their own insecurities onto you. You know what I mean? They
Yep.
feel like you shouldn't do a thing or you should do a thing because
Yep.
that's what they believe that they should be doing. And
Yep.
because they see you as a peer, they believe, what's good for you. I mean, what's good for them is good for you. And that's not always the case. And a lot of times when you push back, they take that as like they take it personal. Like you're somehow saying that like because that thing isn't what you want, it's they shouldn't want it either. And a lot of times it's
Yeah.
not that. I'm not
It
I'm
ain't
not
that.
telling you what to eat, fam. I'm not telling you what the I'm you know I live my life and the things I think I should be doing or I think is best for me. It may also be what I think might be better for some people too, but I don't go out of my way to tell you this is what you need to do. I just live my life,
Exactly.
and if you're paying attention, as the old folks say, as the elders would say, like more is caught than taught. So like, I just make sure I live out loud, and hopefully someone's paying attention, and if they respect what they see me doing, they find inspiration in that and try to better their lives. And I mean, who can ask for more than that?
Beautiful, substantial. Thank you so much, brother. I got a few shout outs and then we're going to close it. Shout out. I really want to shout this out. Shout out to the United States government getting those motherfuckers on Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. Well
Yeah,
deserved. Life
yes,
sentences.
indeed.
No mercy. Okay. And it's an interview out there. Maybe you caught it as well, Stan. It probably
Mm-hmm.
on Instagram as well. Ahmaud Arbery's father discussing
Mm-hmm.
that, like they want to be set up nice and all this mercy and all this other bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
No, you gonna get what's coming to you. Well
Yeah,
deserved. He ain't asked
yeah,
for no mercy. He didn't have no mercy when you laid him out there when he was out there on his run.
right,
You know what I mean?
right.
And I hate talking like that about people because, like I said,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people don't understand like just our nature in general as African American. I'm very peaceful, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But y'all went out there and did that to them people. You need to get exactly back what they got, and
Yeah,
and you still breathing. They
right,
gone. So
right.
big shout out to you know, as it always is. Just takes years on end,
Mm-hmm.
for us to get something, but we got it, and
Right.
God willing, it ain't no loopholes or some that get them out of that situation, and they
Mm-hmm.
need to sit in there their whole life to think about what it is that they did to those people
Yeah,
unjustifiably. You know what I'm saying?
absolutely.
So that's my shout out. Thank God. Thank the United States government for doing something good. We do some good things sometimes, but this is great. Thank you. Do you have any shout outs substantial?
Um, man, I'm trying to think. Oh, who I want to shout out? Yeah, man, just shout out to the homie Mega Ran, my man Novelist as well. Shout out to Mega Ran and Novelist. We recently did some music, and the main reason I'm bringing up Mega Ran right now, because see, we did an interview for my podcast last week, and yeah, man, just just celebrating. I just want to lift up. I'm one brother lifting up another really good brother. You know what I mean?
That's how we
And
got to
Rand
do
is
it,
one of
man.
them dudes that I'm forever going to root for, because like man, I feel like some days there's a shortage of good human beings, man, in this world, and that dude right there is a great man. He's a great dude through and through. And so yeah, man. So shout out to Mega Ran, man. We've been doing showing a lot of love to each other lately. I'm just trying to keep that going. You know what I'm saying, and hope that inspires more brothers to lift up their brothers out here and our sisters
Yes.
as well. You know what I mean? So just want to lift up my homie, man, and I appreciate that dude. Shout out to him. Shout out to my man Kokai, another amazing brother, man, who's been a great mentor to me and a better friend. So, I shout out them two dudes, and yeah, man, just to piggyback off what you said, I'm 100% with you. I feel like people forget the main thing folks is asking for is equality. And what equality looks like sometimes, because a lot of times folks want mercy, and I'm like, nah, B. You know what I mean? I want you to have what somebody like me would have for doing the same thing. That's it. That's what equality look like. And I want less of the roadblocks in my life so I can get to build wealth building and things like that, and I don't have to work harder than you to get the same opportunities. That's all I want. You know what I mean? Like
That's it.
I just want folks out the way because
That's all.
I'm good at getting to these opportunities and turning these opportunities into things that are beneficial. But what I can't control is people who have ill intentions, right? And make it harder for people like me and other people who are willing to work hard to just get we're just trying to have the same things, fam. I'm like, I don't need more than you, fam. I just want to be able
Oh
to
yeah,
have
no.
access to the same
That's
things.
it.
And so
That's
this
all.
idea that somehow we ain't worthy, like nah, fam. It's like so equality is you having access to the same system,
Mm,
right? And how
mm,
that system has
mm,
treated us,
mm.
for doing the same crimes. So hey man, you know what I'm saying? And enjoy.
Yeah.
I hope your cellmate's not so friendly. You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying?
yeah. I don't care. Yeah, exactly,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
exactly. Man,
And
so with that being said, substantial man, thank you for spending a little, over an hour with me. Like I really truly appreciate having this interview, speaking to a brother, of your standing, and like I said, when I got the DM back from you, I was surprised. I was like, oh, I was like, sub got Stan got back to me, man. I was like, with that alone just kind of show what type of brother you are, what type of individual
appreciate
you
it,
are
man.
to somebody of your caliber to give me, an hour and some change of your time to come on, my platform and just, speak to you. And you're deeply and I truly appreciate that.
It's my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me, brother.
Yes, thank you, Substantial. So, hey, everybody, with that being said, man, wherever you at in the world, morning, noon, and night, remember to always be you. And that is it. Peace.